Welcome back to another episode of the Marketing Measurement Matters podcast. Today with Dr. Tim Wiegels and Tim Kreinkamp in the usual three constellations, so to say. So really looking forward to this one. And our topic for today is we had a couple of discussions about make or buy. So we thought we're going to take it a step further and discuss how it should look like if you chose to buy a solution.
Which you should always choose, of course.
We completely unbiased in that regard. I don't know what Mr. Wiegels has to say in that.
It depends on the use case, but you know I'm a buy fan, right? So
yeah, I also just realized the setup is a bit weird because I always have to look to the left and the right. Probably figure that out for the next episode. So we're still experimenting, and very much looking forward to this episode. So we thought we're going to talk about that. But before that, are there any newsworthy updates that we should talk about? I would have one thing that I would like to share, but anything that you came across in the measurement industry, so to say, any spectacular things happening?
I'm not sure if it's spectacular, but the figure itself is a bit astonishing. So I recently came across something on LinkedIn, which apparently was shared by Boston Consulting at a conference about marketing measurement. And the gist of that was that only that 68% of marketing mix modeling clients, they don't take action on the results of the model for budgeting decisions, and that's a bit sad. But maybe we can shed some light on that here as well in this episode, because maybe there's an underlying problem in the vendor-client relationship.
And just to be clear, that means that 68% of the buyers of that solution basically waste money because
they waste money in the solution.
They're
it's
not
completely useless
on the inside. So
but the other question is how many people really take actions on their multi-touch attribution or last click, right?
Same thing. Same.
We don't know that. I hope it's less than more than 60%.
On anything.
Yeah.
I think that we always have to acknowledge for any analytics product, it's not something that is inherently bad in marketing mix modeling. No. Many people take actions on all the dashboards that have been made available to them over the course of their careers.
Yeah. Then the other thing that I wanted to mention, a big shout out to Cassandra and Gabriele for raising 2 million for their, I think it was a seed round. So they have been bootstrapping up until now. So Cassandra is a MMM vendor as well in the space. So it's a competitor, but also we have a quite good relationship with them. So happy for them and good luck on the journey that now follows. And the VCs that are on their back now. So we kind of got rid of ours.
Why are you saying it like this?
No, I'm not going to comment on that any further. I'm just going to get me in trouble. Okay, then let's start with the actual topic.
Yeah.
And let's discuss. So imagine you chose to buy a solution. First thinking maybe, what kind of solution should you actually buy? What
funnel measurement.
More from a conceptual point. What should you look for? Of course, all the features that funnel measurement has. But
understand your use case, right? So
okay,
what do you actually need? Why do you want to build something? What do you want to build? And is it better to build this in-house? What kind of expertise do you need in-house? But this is the make or buy thing, right? So you have to decide what you want, and then you have to find the right partner to solve that for you.
And I think that's a crucial point that you're making here. So many problems that can arise in the vendor-buyer relationship, they have been planted, the seeds of those problems have been planted during the selection process, right?
During the pre-sales process.
During the pre-sales process. Mismanaged expectations, maybe the solution is not the right fit.
Missing
the team
knowledge
is not the right fit.
Yeah.
Maybe the buyer themselves, they weren't even ready to buy a solution yet. That can also happen because we have to acknowledge here it's slightly more complex than choosing who's the supplier for your coffee beans in the office.
Or for your HR software or
there can be quite a complex HR software, but let's not go there at this point.
I think that's as bad. I think it's even worse.
Is it?
Yeah,
Okay.
because HR softwares are always overweight and you don't need most of the things. And the things you do need are not in there, but different story.
Whatever.
Yeah.
So excuse my ignorance about the complexity of HR software that wasn't intended. But maybe let's compare it to, I don't know. No, I'm just going to leave it at that. So just wanted to point out that measurement can be quite complex, at least in our experience.
And it can also be a significant investment. I mean, we talked about in previous episodes why buying might actually be cheaper than making, but still, it's going to be a significant investment that you're going to be looking at.
Yeah.
And often also contract durations it's quite standard for SaaS contracts, but for measurement contracts also in particular, probably you're going to be locked into the contract for at least a couple of months, but typically more than like a year or even several years. So it does pay dividends to take a little more time for the selection, maybe. I mean, salespeople now will hate me because I'm not exactly shortening their sales cycles, but that's maybe time well spent still. So what would you look for, guys, when you were looking for marketing measurement or marketing analytics vendor? Like, how would you evaluate if the vendor is the right fit for you?
Yeah, I think Tim Wiegels had a really valuable point that you should first think about the use cases.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't make sense to look at features or the product. You need to understand what kind of use cases you have. So maybe I would love to turn that question around and discuss maybe the top 3 use cases that you or we regularly see for measurement.
No, go for that. I also wanted to say, if you have these use cases and when you actually choose what the right vendor is, you need to do an RFP. So, which is the same, right? RFP, request for proposal. Put in the stuff you need.
Don't do an RFP just by funnel measurement. Saves you a lot of time, etc.
Yeah, it's also
RFPs
also really good.
We love RFPs, but also sales cycles.
But honestly, from the buyer perspective, I think that's something that many people don't do, and then they say like, oh, I mean, best example is companies buying stuff like Salesforce. Oh, that's the best tool. Yeah, maybe not. And
I mean, some businesses have to do it for compliance reasons.
Yeah,
they cannot just go, oh, I think that's a great solution.
Yeah,
just buy it. So.
I mean, what's the English word for a tender? So RFP and tender. I mean, in the end, it's pretty much the same, right?
Yes, yeah, exactly.
And it's also always good to have at least. It's good that Cassandra is now bigger because that means you can also have another provider and check out how much better funnel measurement is. Now it's always good to have like 2 or 3 vendors in an RFP because then you can compare properly and.
Yeah, and what we see, for example, on RFPs are specific use cases that are being listed. So, for example, they want to know one particular example, an actual example. They want to know how much do our branding campaigns influence other lower funnel channels, and through that impact sales and revenue. So this is a particular use case.
But that's already quite detailed, right?
That's a very sophisticated. That's a company that already has done a lot of MTA and MMM, and they are now looking for a more frequent and more granular measurement, holistic measurement system. But just as an example. But maybe it's not one of the top 3. Maybe you have more useful ones that you encounter a lot.
So many people, actually quite a few customers, they come to us after they basically after they have outgrown Google Analytics. So what you often see in Google Analytics is that search takes all of the credit, but branded search is working great, generic search as well, and social is non-existent, and neither is TV or out of home. Yeah. So now maybe you've raised a bit of money, you can spend a bit more money on demand generation, and Google Analytics, as great as it is not the right tool for the job there. So now you come to us with a not as detailed as yours, but quite a specific use case. Like, I want to know how my upper funnels are performing in terms of incremental revenue. And then okay, right, good, we can do that, right? So then you're going to be looking at the vendor who can actually do marketing mix modeling, who goes beyond multi-touch distribution, and ideally you will also have some capabilities for incrementality testing. Mm-hmm. Now, do you need those? Maybe not yet, right? Yeah. Because maybe you're not ready to test yet. So maybe then also you shouldn't place all your focus in selecting the vendor on the testing capabilities, if that's not something you're going to use in the first year of engagement.
And to be honest, many companies can't even do that, right? I think testing for incrementality or testing and mixed modeling is always quite hard, because that means you have to have more than one country, and you have to have more than one channel and stuff like this.
Or state, at least.
Or state.
Or you need to be able
to be stable.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would even say it's not even. It's even a little bit easier than what you say. Yeah, outgrowing Google Analytics, but I think for most of them it's even easier because, hey, we do TV, we have no idea what's happening.
Yeah,
exactly.
So everything that's untrackable, and I mean, when we really go a little bit further on this, everything becomes more untrackable, right? We have the classical untrackable channels like TV and anything out of home and brand, but I mean, to be honest, as Tim just said, social or Google Ads, I mean, cookie consent is also killing the information there, right?
So that's a great example. We just today had a pitch with the I obviously can't name the name, but they're working with one of these MMM vendors in the Magic Quadrant of Gartner.
Oh God, yeah.
One of the, I think
Been there, done that.
it's very far on the far right, not in political sense, but in the upper far right corner.
One of the best ones.
One of the best ones, seemingly, but they only provide like quarterly or half-year updates.
Yeah,
crazy.
I might know who that vendor is because
Yeah, we're obviously not going to name them.
I did the same at Free Now, and I was very unhappy with the results.
No, it's a different ones. I know
But
which ones.
that's an excellent point here.
But they seem, maybe it's a...
It sounds very, very similar to...
It's a criteria to end up in the Magic Quadrant to only provide quarterly updates.
Yeah,
I'm just kidding.
But that's a great point that you're making here. So basically, let's assume that you kind of zeroed in. All right, okay, you need marketing mix bundling because you need offline marketing channel evaluation. Now you've zeroed on the basic capabilities that you want. But now we get actually to a way of working, or like an operation mode, right?
Yeah.
And maybe you need, maybe you don't need weekly or daily or whatever frequent updates. Then fine, then you can take these vendors into your consideration set.
Yeah.
But maybe you're operating in a very fast-paced business where you would need at least weekly updated results, or maybe bi-weekly or whatever.
Yes.
And then you should also remove these legacy vendors that can only do quarterly from your consideration
Just
set.
one important aspect here. Don't let the vendor dictate your update cycles. Don't let any one of these Magic Quadrant or any vendor tell you, no, MMM on a weekly or even on a daily level is complete bullshit. You shouldn't do that. I would be highly skeptical if the vendor...
But maybe they just can't, right? I mean, maybe you guys can do that, but they are not able to.
Exactly, and then they shouldn't dictate what you want based on, because there's a lot more possibilities nowadays. And what we see sometimes is that vendors, of course, because of the limitations, are not trying to dictate how MMM should be done, and it should be done this way, and not with too much AI, etc.
High AI is bad. Yeah.
Okay, so assume you have your RFP or your use cases set up. You selected the vendor that has the best fit. You go into discussions. What should you look at in terms of? Now the real work starts in terms of onboarding. You sign the contract. Well, we leave out all the commercial contractual.
That just works magically.
Yeah, that works magically
Which we
all
all
the time.
know
And
is
then also
true and fast.
the DPAs is flawless.
And there's no 20 rounds and hoops you have to jump through.
No holdups
buy
because of
something in the
that. No
company.
decrease of sales cycle.
We all
whatsoever.
appreciate the work that all the compliance and legal and procurement departments out there are doing. We know it's hard work. It is a lot of work.
So you start working. So what should you look? Maybe you should also before you actually sign the contract. What is critical in terms of looking for how the onboarding implementation works? Should you look for a vendor that is more on the consulting side or more SaaS, or what are specifics there? What maybe towards you? Because we're obviously a bit biased, but
that totally depends on what you need, right? Whether it's consulting or SaaS. I would say for most of the stuff I always bought, it's less consulting. And if it's honestly, also if it's consulting or SaaS, doesn't matter. There needs to be some kind of project plan or milestone plan or something like this. So what I always really want at the onboarding is like, hey, we do this for the first 2 weeks, we do this for the next 4 weeks, and this is next. And this is then a milestone. After 3 months, we have something. So I think this is really important. And this also needs to be there and clear before you sign the contract.
Okay, that's interesting. That's so you expect the vendor to sort of provide, at least help you to create a project plan and milestones and.
To be honest, no, an onboarding plan, not a project plan. But to be honest, I rarely had someone who didn't provide that. There was always something like, we need to do this first, and this is our idea for the first 100 days together.
Yeah.
So I once had someone from a company that provides electronic signatures. I think we all know which one. Call me, and they wanted to make a project plan, and I was like, bro, I just wanted to sign something. But generally, I do agree.
We're on the free trial, and they wanted to give you a project plan on how to get there.
It doesn't have to happen for all the tools. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, but otherwise, completely agreed. And I think I would add to that on both sides, you need some form of leadership buy-in.
Yes.
So at Funnel, we work with this concept of executive sponsors for our strategic clients. But you can have something else. You can just be a regular senior manager, whatever, assigned to oversee the project. But I would argue you would need that on the client side as well, because you need resources client side. It's typically good to work with a dedicated point of contact. But sometimes you need more resources, right? Sometimes you need people to, change something on the website, not for MMM, but if you want to do something with tracking, sometimes you need a few more engineers, whatever involved. And then if you have
maybe even for MMM because you don't have any tracking at all.
No, for that, no. But maybe you need data. Of course, if you work with funnel, we bring the data, fine. But sometimes you need other people involved, and then it's always good to have the senior contact on the other side who can ensure that the right resources are actually provisioned for the project in a timely manner.
And very important on this, the project sponsor needs to understand why the tool is needed urgently and the use case. And because quite often you just get a project sponsor because that's the CMO. But the CMO or anyone might not even be understanding completely why that tool is needed.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. They might have the sort of executive power to push stuff through and allocate additional resources to project that weren't planned for. But if they don't get why it's valuable, then it might be hard for them to actually do this. That makes a ton of sense.
And that makes also sense because you said leadership, but you also need clear contact persons and people who are responsible for it. I don't want to put the RACI on the table because I hate this shit. But
what is the RACI?
What's the RACI term?
Responsible, accountable, consulted, informed. And that's
what is that used for? Because I think that concept in itself is quite interesting.
That's quite often used for sitting in meetings for 10 days and not finding any solution.
So not an actual race.
That's ranting about RACI. No, I mean it makes sense because there's someone responsible for the tool, which is I think the most important thing. There's someone accountable for the project to work out. So which means the responsible person can be a senior data scientist in the team. That's your main contact person. That's the person understanding what's happening and when stuff needs to happen. Then there's the team lead who is owning the budget. So he's accountable. Yeah. And then consulted is probably people in tech and informed. Yeah. That doesn't really leave room for the project sponsor. Well, maybe the project sponsor is responsible. I have no idea.
He's responsible for creating the RACI.
Accountable.
Person.
And I think that's, let's say R and A are important. So you need someone responsible on the other side, and you need someone accountable who can push stuff through. And also
on both sides.
Sign your contracts.
Yeah, that's quite important.
Okay, so that's important for the onboarding. What should one look for when there are hiccups? Data is not available, tracking doesn't look as expected. Does that ever happen?
To be honest, that's actually one thing I, from the buyer side, rarely understand because, I see it all the time that it happens, right? But usually when I buy a tool, I should be aware what I need and I should be able to operationalize the tool. And I think that's the worst thing that always happens, right? Best example, we wanted to buy a CDP at some point, great data to enrich the data. We couldn't operationalize it. So we killed that quite quickly. And I think that's something that needs to be, fixed on the buyer side and really be understood on the buyer side. Can you get the tool? Because I think the worst thing that happens is that you get a really good tool. The tool tries to help you with everything. But then you just realize after 3 months, hey, we just can't use it because we don't have any means to operationalize it because at first the data might not be there. Yeah. Secondly, there might be no one responsible for the tool, also quite often. Or,
So someone you mean issues. Not responsible in terms of looking in the insights and actually acting upon crazy. Okay.
Well, there we come back to the topic we discussed in the very beginning, right? The 68% who don't make actual use of the tool. Yeah. I think that's something that should ideally be fixed in advance before you even start with the RFP. Normally, like, why do you need this tool? Like, right, because it's going to help us with that. But can you actually have it help you with that?
Yeah,
and you need MMM for budgeting, good. But if the CMO does the budget like this and he doesn't want to change that, then you don't need an MMM tool.
And do you have anyone who really takes care of the MMM tool? Because I think that sounds bad, but a lot of tools that are being bought are bought as vanity tools, and then you can say, hey, we use this, we use that. We bought this great contract, but to be honest, no one uses it.
Yeah, I could imagine the board asking the CMO, how do we measure and make sure the campaigns work? We have this awesome vendor in place who does MMM. And then they obviously are happy, but they don't forget to ask, like, are we following up on the insights? And Ben Dutter from Power Digital had an amazing post on LinkedIn about how you shouldn't blame your tool if you're not deriving any value from it because you're scared to actually change something. And that's something that we see a lot. That sometimes brands find it really hard to just go ahead and take the plunge and actually follow some of the recommendations. Instead, what they like to do is really question everything around it. And remember, they're coming from a last click world, which is obviously BS, very obvious. But they still question this more sophisticated approach. Also, maybe, of course, can be the vendor's fault because they haven't delivered the sort of trust necessary to follow through. But that's something that we see happening every now and then it's really up on us to convince the client to do that. I mean, we have our measurement consultants for that, but that doesn't work in a software as a service way, a touchless way at least.
No.
Not for the. I mean, for the most sophisticated, maybe who know exactly what they want and just want to switch out the tools to some degree. But even then, it's tough. I mean, one of our mobility vendors, they are like, we don't need to tell them what to do with our insights. They just go and do it. Yeah. Even to a degree where we are like, okay, this is crazy fast. But I think that can be fixed before you actually sign a contract. That you say, okay, this is if the insights look this way. For example, if you see that paid social prospecting or branding on Meta works this much better than expected, then shift some budget there, do a test, think about doing a test.
What do you mean that people should actually do a hypothesis on use cases before they start
crazy?
Doing things?
No, but yeah.
That's a very hard word.
But I think it could help in terms of understanding what
100%, but that never happens.
Yeah. Would be
so. I think one thing that would also make sense, like, okay, before you even start working with the tool, before you start the onboarding, you formulate a few things where you say, okay, in an ideal world, if this really worked well, these are the insights I would be getting out of the tool, and that's what I would be doing then. Right?
Yes.
Yeah. If this happens, then I would do that. Yeah.
And then just plug the actual insights in.
Yes. Yeah. So, I mean, this sounds very much like a blame game towards the marketing managers at the brand side. And
No.
But I think we can also do much better at that as vendors and solutions out there instead of just.
And that's but different things here, right? So So one thing I think every vendor needs to periodically do is rethink, like, hey, are the insights that I'm providing, are they actually accessible enough? Yeah. Do I make it clear enough to the client, like, that this is the insight? If not, what am I supposed to do? Do I need to change the product? Do I need to sprinkle a bit of AI on top to make the insights more accessible? Or do I just need better visualizations, better dashboards, more KPIs, less
consultants
KPIs,
to
whatever.
communicate more efficiently?
Or do I hire consultants?
Yeah.
But
and the SaaS companies sometimes don't want consultants.
Yeah.
But sometimes it might be actually quite useful to have them.
Yeah, and accessibility of the insights is key here and can mean many different things, right? As you mentioned, like, how do you communicate the insights? Through Gen AI, chatbot, whatever, through consultants. But it could also mean you need to create the trust so that it's really accessible.
But
right?
this
because if I just see some number, I don't know how it came up. You need to provide the insights. You need to be transparent about your algorithms. You need to explain and have tutorials and knowledge base in place.
And I mean, if you talk about this again, this is something you decide between make or buy. If you make something, you have someone in the company who's responsible for that. And I think the important thing is also the way this partnership is shaped. And the partnership from both sides should be shaped. Hey, you as a vendor, you should actually think about that the customer can tell you how to build your product better and what to improve. But at the same time, as a customer, you also should be in close contact with the vendor and talk to the vendor about stuff that can happen. I mean, when I think back about the gaming times, and we had this in the Sunda podcast already, I mean, there was always to think like, hey, we want this. And the vendor's like, that sounds awesome. Why do you want this? And that was really a very close relationship, as if you would work together in one company because you build one product together.
Yeah. That's another key factor to really understand where the client is coming from and why they want specific insights, which as a vendor you might just not have.
I think that's also the most valuable stuff when you sell your things. That you actually you get lots of beta testers, right? And you get lots of people that tell you, hey, this is something we still need, and I'm missing this tiny piece of information.
Yes, and it's also new to many people. Like they are, that makes it, a bit difficult to know exactly what you need to be able to rapid prototype. So my recommendation to every vendor out there, have a set of customers that you feel comfortable in showing early feature tools to get really honest, and direct feedback.
But it's funny because when you say this, I thought about something else. It's also new for many companies to be allowed to give input to your vendor because I think quite often it's like, hey, when you buy Tableau, sorry, Tableau is quite big. Or when you buy Power BI, I'm not sure whether you can call someone at Microsoft and be like, hey, Steve, hey, Bill Gates, I want to have this feature in Power BI. But I can call you for sure and say like, hey, this measurement thing in funnel, we need to improve this and this. I want that.
Yes, you are allowed to do that.
Yeah, okay.
But maybe also call Tim. He probably understands better.
Yeah, true. No, but then you ask weird questions about science and tech, which I don't understand.
Mr. Doctor.
Okay, so I think we covered everything in the.
We could cover offboarding, but let's not go there.
There shouldn't be an offboarding, but
maybe it's also cover that, because I think there's one offboarding reason that comes quite often from buyers, because when they realize, hey, we bought something, we now have people in the company that use this a lot. It became a lot easier to build it ourselves, and maybe at some point we have to in-house that.
Mm-hmm.
So I think with SaaS solutions, you still have that case that there's in-housing quite often. But I think that's something where I as a buyer should be quite transparent. Hey, maybe, and I think funnel is a good example, right? Hey, I need someone to quickly get all my data in. I think when the team grows and when we are quite clear what kind of channels we use, consolidation phase in the company, we might be able to do that ourselves. But I think offboarding is not a bad thing. Yeah, sure, because you as a customer, obviously. Yeah. But I think if the offboarding is quite open and honest from both sides, I mean, you will always be, what's the word? I mean, if I go to the next company because I hate consolidation, then I will just buy the same tool again, because that's the way it works.
I just try to remember whether we ever had an offboarding of a client because they wanted to in-house everything that they got from us. It was more
it's interesting.
Yeah, sometimes people say like, yeah, we just have a couple of APIs, we can call them ourselves. I don't think they realized how difficult it is.
No, sometimes they come back because then they manage it's one thing to have all these APIs connected initially, but then maintaining them, it's a
and then
struggle.
It's from offboarding to win back,
which we like a lot. We have some of our I think I can share this. No, I should. But at least 2 of our largest clients came back after a while because of the triangulation approach. That was that's actually the biggest success, because then you can prove, okay, we developed further. They find it interesting.
Maybe with the insights of another customer.
So that was nice. And funnily enough, it happened all within half a year. Both clients came back. It was great success. So just one small thing with regards to in-housing, which I think is fair enough. There might be good reasons to do this all on yourself. I honestly don't think that it's ever a good reason because you want to consolidate, because in the end, business always needs to grow. But maybe it's just a different view. And I still think that funnel data is more efficient than compared to.
You don't have to tell me.
So but then the other thing is where we also want to develop into, maybe also one thing to look into vendor relationship, that the vendor lock-in isn't that high in terms of, okay, there are possibilities to in-house parts of it. And which could that be? Is there really a lot of value if I hire a bunch of engineers who do the whole ETLing, which should be standardized, which where you need to look into the API caps and how to manage that. That's a whole. It's not just getting the data there.
No.
All of these things, and then process them in a way that you can actually do the modeling. So I think the whole data engineering part, I would question whether that should ever be in-house. What I could see in being in-house is the actual data science part, knowing exactly which, how the causal graph should look like, which variables to include, which control variables include. And that's also where we think there's a huge potential for providing a sort of machine learning or marketing measurement infrastructure.
Toolbox,
so to say, where you can also maybe plug in different, open source models compared to the funnel measurement model, etc. And
I mean, to be honest, with funnel, you already provide this toolbox, right? You provide the toolbox to get all the data, to have the data available, and then
the data engineering part, yes, and the data science part we now have as well.
Yeah. So, I mean, that was a shameless plug, I just realized.
Yeah, no, I like
I'm
that.
so excited about our development and strategy there. It seems really to make sense.
You have to show that to me at some point.
Yeah,
I don't even know about that.
One of the best.
Great. So, 29 minutes on the clock. We like to be punctual. So, thanks everyone for listening in. I hope it was valuable. And please follow us on all the specific podcast channels. If you don't do so, subscribe. Also, leave us a comment if you want to see specific guests on the show. But a lot of thanks for your attention.
Can I have a final word?
Yeah, of course.
And if you are really always nice to your vendors and you work closely together with your vendors, you might be sitting on podcasts with them at some point 7 years later.
Exactly.
Right?
True.
Exactly.
That's true. Cool. Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Bye.